the Juvenile Justice Committee, which serves as a subcommittee of the Youth Development Council. And so just welcome everybody for joining us today. We have kind of a busy agenda with lots of really good information and a lot of work that's been done since we didn't meet the last month. So this is good that we're getting together. So with that, thanks, Sam. With that, Anya, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to introduce this Council of State Governments.
Oh, Molly, do you want to take a roll call first?
Oh, yes, sorry. Joy, will you help me out with that?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So when I call out the name, if you can just say present or just put a reaction, that'll be great. Thank you. First, we have Andy Leonard, Tabitha Lewis, Adrian Livingston.
Livingston? Yes, here.
Christina isn't present today. Raphael Miller.
Yes, present.
Molly Rogers.
I'm here.
Keith Wilson. And Sam Cole.
Sam is here.
Okay. Yeah, that's it for me, Molly.
Thank you so much, Joy. So now with that, Anya, can I kick it over to you?
Of course, but I think I will let our guests introduce themselves. I will just say that I had the privilege to invite Josh and Christina here to talk about the work that the Council of State Governments has been doing in Oregon, mostly helping the Judicial Department with their initiative to improve juvenile justice, actually the juvenile delinquency court system. And in the conversations that we had, it was an interesting combination, I thought, for us to combine efforts and maybe see how we can support each other, since the Youth Development Council is technically a state advisory group for the state of Oregon. And I asked Josh and Christina to join us today and maybe share a little bit about what they're doing on a national level, as well as what you're doing here in Oregon and whatever you want to talk about. We're delighted to have you. Josh.
Well, thank you. And Christina couldn't join, but I'm joined by my colleague Hunter, who can also introduce himself. So I'm Josh Weber. I work at the Council of State Governments Justice Center as part of our juvenile justice team. If you're not familiar with the Council of State Governments Justice Center, we're a national nonprofit that works with all branches of state government as well as local government on how to improve outcomes for youth and adults in the justice system through consensus-based, evidence-based strategies. So I can talk a little bit more about the work that we're doing in Oregon, and then would love to get some of your thoughts. But Hunter, do you want to introduce yourself?
My name's Hunter Hurst, and I work with the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, which is at the National Judicial College in the same area in Reno, Nevada. And I work in its research division, its separate research data division in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She may join us kind of midstream, but my director of the National Center for Juvenile Justice, Dr. Melissa Sickmond, is also part of the project, was in part of the first phase 1 study that helped to set this up, and thrilled to be here.
So I can provide some background on the work that we're doing, and then would be great if we've got a little bit of time to get any thoughts that you all have. So as Hunter just alluded to, this work started with us together with NCJ, SCJ conducting a national 50-state study to look at how all states across the country, how their courts handle delinquency cases. Because states differ pretty significantly on whether they have dedicated specialized family court judges or they just have general jurisdiction judges, and how caseloads are assigned, whether judges rotate, what kind of tools and resources they provide judges to inform their decision making. So we did analysis of all 50 states, which included conversations with leaders in every state about how they handle juvenile delinquency cases. We did a survey that had over 450 respondents. We did focus groups with folks across the country, and that led to a national report to share our findings and really uplift the need for more specialized approaches to how states handle delinquency cases and how to ensure judges have the tools, information, data, resources they need to make effective research-based decisions. As a second phase of that work, we are providing technical assistance to 3 different states to help them essentially assess how their state courts handle delinquency cases in line with the findings and recommendations of that 50-state study. So the states include Mississippi, Montana, and Oregon. So we are working with the Oregon Judicial Department, and they have established kind of 2 statewide committees. One is a committee of just judges. The other is called the Juvenile Delinquency Improvement Program Committee, which has stakeholders across branches of government and different systems to basically oversee our work, which is a statewide assessment in Oregon of how courts across the state handle delinquency cases, what's working well, where are the challenges, where are the opportunities for system improvement. So we started that work. Some of you may have come to a summit that OJG had, the first ever Juvenile Delinquency Summit a few months ago, and we helped to facilitate breakout sessions there. Since then, we've been spending the last couple of months having focus groups with different stakeholders across the state. That's included judges and referees, court administrators, chief probation officers and probation staff. And we're also going to be talking to prosecutors and public defenders, and had outreach to Anya and have been outreaching to other folks just to make sure we know what's going on within the state when it comes to juvenile justice, and identify where there are gaps, challenges, and opportunities for improvement. And our goal is to basically synthesize all of that feedback. We will also be doing juvenile court data analysis. So we'll have data from the last couple of years to see who has been referred to juvenile court, adjudicated, disposed, how that differs across the state based on the offenses that kids commit, based on demographics. And together with the qualitative information, we'll be sharing that back with the JDIP and this judges committee. And the goal is to help them come to consensus on a statewide, basically juvenile court improvement plan. That might be changes to training, it might be changes to larger juvenile court structures, might be changes to substantive policies like how dispositional or detention decisions are made. But the hope is this really serves as a way to develop an action plan for really strengthening statewide court policies and practices and having more consistency across the state around research-based policies and practices. Hunter, anything I missed in terms of that overview?
No, great overview. We're really kind of at least waist deep in Oregon, details in Oregon. We've also talked with victim advocate representatives in the state in a focus group. And in the chat, Josh, Sam asked, and I can't specifically remember because it's been the summit happened in September, late September, and did we have was there an education liaison or somebody from the? I think there may be.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't certainly explicitly for schools, but I'm pretty sure in remembering that we did have education representatives who attended the summit as well. Would love to get some of your thoughts on the project and have some specific questions, but first, just any questions on kind of who we are and what we're doing? Or is that pretty straightforward?
And Molly, go ahead.
I just want, there are members of our committee. And so we'll make sure that we ask that they have priority to ask questions. But I also know we have some partners on the call today. And by no means is this an exclusive conversation. So partners who are on the call, if you're not a member, it is absolutely acceptable to raise your hand or ask a question in the conversation. Was that what you were going to say, Anya?
Yes. And also, I was just gonna say, Molly, I think you were at the summit as well. And I'm not sure if Joe and Dan, who are juvenile directors here in the audience, were you able to attend it?
Yes, I was.
Sam, I'm not sure, were you at the summit or?
I was not. Yeah, I didn't hear about it in September, but maybe some of our JDEP sites or, educators were there.
So Sam, do you want to introduce yourself, not just as a member of the Juvenile Justice Committee, but what you actually do for the kids and for juvenile justice? Because it seems to me that since Josh and Hunter are still working on improving your Oregon system, you might be an excellent resource for them to connect and learn about how education is provided in both juvenile detention as well as juvenile correctional facilities.
Sure. Okay. Like Josh Hunter, as you surveyed juvenile justice, education is also varies from state to state, where some states, the school district where the facility is located provides education, or the juvenile justice, the county or the state juvenile justice agency or DHS provides education, or how in Oregon, the state educational agency, the SEA, is responsible for providing the education in the facilities. So, and I found and I think Oklahoma is one state where they have charter schools, and so forth. So like Washington, in the state of Washington, the school district where the facility is located has their teachers in the facilities. But in Oregon, the state, Oregon State Department of Education has the responsibility to provide the education and, more importantly, to fund the education. And then for like at Norcor, at Molly's facility, I think they average about 7 or 8 kids, and we provide like $260,000. And that's quite a bit. And the length of our education compared to other states are, we fund 220 days. And if you think about 20 working days in a month, 220 divided by 20 is 11 months. The 12th month is 1 week off in summer, 1 week off in spring, and 2 weeks off at Christmas. So when Anya says our unit, Adam Henning and I, we provide education for the kids that are in the facilities, and then not just that, what a good number of our hours are spent with technical assistance with when school districts are having questions or difficulties with kids within the facilities and so forth. And then like last week and this week, working with a kid that's graduating in Jackson County, and then another kid from Central Point from Jackson, it's in and out, and they're wondering if they can get a modified diploma instead of a regular diploma, things like that, because a lot of school districts, they don't understand juvenile justice. And, so we spend a lot of our time with our component school districts. So that's what we do. We, at Oregon Department of Ed, we fund it and we contract or we work to get teachers into the facilities.
Well, that relates to, I guess, one of the questions that I was going to ask folks is, the focus of this study is on the juvenile court and judges' roles in guiding decisions, but obviously the juvenile court works closely with other partners in the system. Are there key areas that you all, from your perspective, think that we should make sure to focus on or ask about in our assessment process, or that you'd want to see this project give attention to?
This is Adrian. I think for me, and I'm not within the system, what I do is really work with sex trafficking awareness and prevention and understand that on many levels, not just within this, but just even in the criminal system, that our youth of color are judged at harsher rates than white youth. And so I would want to make sure that that equity lens is also taken into consideration of how judges are judging these youth, and specifically looking at the ability to judge all at an equal level, and that our youth of color are not being even much more harshly penalized and criminalized because they are a person of color.
Thank you for that. We'll certainly have an opportunity to look at that in the data that we're going to analyze, and are asking all of our focus groups around equity, and equity will be a strong theme of our work with the JDIP and the State Judges Committee moving forward.
Thank you.
Are there other issues that stand out that we should make sure to be exploring, or just other needs in terms of just general system improvement that you all have talked about that you think we could be attuned to as part of this project?
Josh, this is Molly. I'm actually going to ask Adrian a question. Is there any place else that Josh and Hunter should be looking at for that equity lens that they may have overlooked? I just want to make sure that you may were offering a resource and we didn't hear it.
No, I think because this is all still new to me, I don't know exactly what's being reviewed to be able to offer more guidance and feedback. But just at a top level, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
For Sam, this is new to me, so I would have to read the report and yeah, to give an informed and educated response, because yeah, I don't know, like if it's sentencing or referrals, like diversion activities, like yeah. So yeah, for me, I'm just soaking it on and
I think Hunter said he's going to put the report in the chat, but what we can certainly do is, after folks have digested that, happy to hear any additional feedback. But it's pretty far ranging in terms of the kinds of issues that we're looking at. It is, when youth are referred to court, kind of what happens to them, how or why are diversion decisions made, detention decisions, dispositional decisions, supervision and service decisions, the structure of the court overall, and whether there should be more specialized judges, what are the qualifications of those judges, what kind of training do those judges receive, do they get risk and needs assessments and other tools and resources to guide their decision making? What kind of tools should be available statewide to guide judicial and other stakeholders' decisions on these cases? How does the judiciary collaborate or not with other parts of the system, and are there opportunities to improve that collaboration? What kind of data is available to both guide judicial decision making as well as to evaluate how decisions are being made, and are those being made consistently across the state? So looking at a variety of both structural and substantive issues as it relates to how courts handle delinquency cases.
Josh, after I had the opportunity to participate in one of the focus groups and then hearing you today, I also think one of the other areas or focus groups that may be of interest might be the leadership of the Association of Counties. We have talked about it being a local state system, the bifurcated system. And I know you had focus group on juvenile justice, but I also know that Association of Oregon Counties has some pretty active county commissioners on their Health and Human Services and Public Safety committees that might want to participate in a focus group if there was still space to have or add any of those on. I don't know, I have, yeah, and if that is the case, and if you bring those, I see Hunter's comment, we might be able to share a screen with those 5 on it too.
If we were gonna speak with a group of county commissioners, what would be the best way? Is there like a group of those or association?
There is, I bet I have email addresses. Anya and I can make sure that we get you connected.
Great.
Yes, and also, isn't Zan still chairing Public Safety Committee for AOC?
That is exactly why I thought about it, was because the Zan's on our Youth Development Council.
Right. So we would be happy to connect you with some folks there. And I see that, Rafi, you put a few comments relating to restorative justice practices. Do you want to say something?
I mean, I don't have much to add, but I've experienced and been on several different committees and boards connected to the restorative justice world. And I know that one of the shortcomings or challenges in our state is there's a lot of interest from justice connected partners, school partners in pursuing restorative justice, but there isn't a very strong network across the state to provide those services and support. So really strong in some counties, I mean, Jackson County for one, and then just non-existent in other parts of the county. So I'd be curious like how even knowledge of restorative justice around the state ties into some of these conversations.
Yeah. And that was part of the conversation we had with the victims advocates folks, but yeah, as you can all imagine, a significant theme of a lot of these conversations is just the significant differences across jurisdictions, whether it's restorative justice or services or how judges make decisions. So a large part of this work will be kind of uplifting those differences and whether there's interest in developing more statewide tools and supports. Any other kind of issues you want to be sure on our radar, or like some of the previous comments, folks that we should make sure to talk to?
Josh, isn't a comment on that, but I did just send you an email. I saw some information that you and Stephanie Shaw did a presentation at another conference. So our Juvenile Justice Statewide Conference is coming up in September of 23. And we really like to bring you guys out to do some sessions for us too. So we can connect through that email on kind of what that may look like if you're interested.
Okay, I will take a look. Thank you for the invitation. Any thoughts from others? So it'll likely be a few months until we have all the data analyzed and complete our qualitative activities, and then present some of our key findings and recommendations to the JDIP and the Judges Advisory Group. If you all think it makes sense, it might be worth maybe us coming back at that time and sharing those recommendations with this group. Certainly one of our goals is to improve collaboration and coordination across the system. And given this body's responsibility, thinking about how those recommendations might inform or build upon your efforts might be useful. So if you all are open to that, that would be great. And that'll probably be sometime in the early spring.
I think that'd be great.
Open.
Yeah, the invitation, we meet on a really regular basis. This is an active group. And so we would appreciate you coming back and sharing with us what you've learned, because it will inform a couple different things that we do.
Great. Hunter, Melissa, anything else?
Anyone? Go ahead, Hunter.
No, I had a thought, but I think I need to run it by Josh first. Sometimes it's dangerous to think.
I was gonna
So,
say, sometimes those are the best thoughts, Hunter.
but
And I joined in so late, I don't want to disrupt the flow of things. I mean, it's you guys are an important stakeholder group, so we want to make sure that we get, all the input from you and then also provide feedback back to you.
That will be great. Thank you. And you're more than welcome. Oh, Sam, go ahead.
I just read the executive summary. I couldn't read the entire report, just the 2-page executive summary. And then, for me, it just seems like, education, since we're talking about juveniles, K-12 education is very important, and I'm wondering, if perhaps, case planning and plans for the youth, on attending school, enrolling in school, can be more called out, sometimes, placements or, dispositions are done for kids, and education is an afterthought, after the kid has been placed. Oh, does that site have an education program? Or, and so forth. Like, what does educate, so sometimes and it's in other states where like a kid is placed and then that state, they don't have a law or they don't provide education in that residential facilities, so, oh, what do they do now? And so forth. So like if something, and recommendation could be like for education to not be an afterthought, but to be part of the case planning, the placement, and then some actionable steps the youth can take upon release during probation or parole, that would be my recommendation. My 2 cents, sorry.
Okay. Well, I think we haven't gotten a ton of feedback from the education community, so we'll definitely think about that. And we know there are important intersections, as you're saying, between juvenile justice and education. So we'll definitely make sure to get some feedback as we move forward.
Yes, Hunter, your hand.
yeah, so that kind of set me up to mention what I was kind of thinking about. I was trying to recall if Josh covered, I just wanted to kind of for it to stand out that we did this 50 state surveying through key state informants in every single one of the states to look at these issues of specialization, how judges are trained or supported, what kind of data they use. And none of them really had a juvenile delinquency court improvement project counterpart to the one that many of you probably realize exists for child welfare, the JSIP. Every state, or most states at least, have a JSIP because there's federal funding to support that. And it's accomplished a lot since the late 90s when it was created, in my opinion, in states at different levels, particularly with training of judges. It was kind of a stand-up. Before this study started, but as our study, phase 1 study was wrapping up, the Oregon Judicial Department reached out to us because your legislature had foreseen, how it was ahead of everybody else in creating the JDEP. We didn't create that. That all was before we got involved, and the folks that were organizing that out of from the beginning reached out to us to see if at the National Council and CSG to see if we had some way to provide help, technical assistance. And we were like, well, yeah, it's funny you should ask, because we're wrapping up this study that's basically one of the recommendations really kind of saying to the federal government, to Congress, hey, you should consider the delinquency, the juvenile justice system needs a similar type of attention that child welfare in the courts and with judges receives. So I just kind of wanted, and this is fairly new, I think just one summit so far, or maybe there were previous summits in the past, the big things with juvenile justice. I don't want to confuse that, but it's so if I would hope that you all have good voice in that, in the JDEP and like the composition, and if education needs more more intersection in it, that hopefully the membership's not completely set. But we don't control that, obviously, because we're coming in from the outside. But it just seems it's a really great opportunity that it's putting you ahead. It could put you kind of ahead of be really a vanguard kind of thing that hopefully other states, if when we succeed with it, can replicate. And I didn't know if I should go that far, Josh. So let me know if I like overstepped. I don't want to say that what I don't real know is how set the membership of the JDIP is, in terms of expanding or where that's set. And that's not, of course, we can't control that.
Yeah, well, we talked with Anya a little bit about that, and it sounds like there's been some historical resistance to judges being a part of this group. And I think certainly one of the goals of our project is to try to help all branches of government and all stakeholders that are working to improve the juvenile justice system kind of get on the same page and work together. So we'll certainly have some recommendations in that regard. And I do think that's where coming back to this group and sharing some of those recommendations at minimum to ensure that you all are coordinating with whatever's coming out of that body will be important. And that might be an opportunity to circle back before we share some of those recommendations, and Anya can reach out to you to get your thoughts or other people's thoughts to help inform what those recommendations actually look like. But certainly from our perspective, it's unusual for the judiciary not to participate in the statewide advisory group. And if we can help to make that happen, we'd be all for doing so.
We will be very grateful.
Well, we don't want to take up more of your time, but appreciate you allowing us to join you this afternoon, and we'll look forward to being in touch as this project moves forward. In the meantime, feel free to reach out to us at any time with any questions or suggestions.
Yeah, and thank you guys. Actually, there are people around the table today that I think are on the JDIP. Instead of the JSIP, the JDIP, that can make sure that we kind of keep an eye out for our education voice. And so that's one of the beautiful parts about this committee and coming together is making sure that as we look around that table, whether we can facilitate or advocate, we can make sure that education's voice is somewhere near the table. So thanks for just even highlighting that for us today, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. And hopefully we'll see you back hopefully in the late spring when the report comes out, and we'll be able to come together.
Good, thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're also more than welcome to stay around and listen if you want to, and by no means feel obligated to, but we're now going to transition into the 2023-2025 JCP planning guidelines. And just want to bring back to everybody how we got to this point. We had talked after our last biennium's planning processes that we were going to be a little bit ahead of the game in the crazy new world of COVID and planning and all of that, to be able to take a look at our guidelines and timelines prior to even the legislative session. And so this committee joined a small subcommittee, or created a small subcommittee that has spent some time with Anya, and she's done a lot of background work, kind of pulling it together through a couple of different meetings. And it came out in the plan with Joy in the packet. So Anya, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Molly, for the introduction. And I just asked Joy to put the draft on the screen. So the hope, the expectation rather of this group today is to look at the guidelines again. Remember, it's a draft form. It will be improved. There'll be some wordsmithing happening before the guidelines actually released. But the idea is to see whether we're adhering both to statute and to the policy direction of the YDC, YDD going on forward. So Molly mentioned that was a group. We worked, we discussed the guidelines. They don't look beautiful, let me just say yet, but they will look nicer after we take another look at them. But on Thursday, this group, the Juvenile Justice Committee of the YDC, will be recommending to the Youth Development Council to adopt the guidelines in general or not to. So that's basically the development of the recommendation we're doing right now. Joy, they're in the folder of the committee. It's the same committee meeting. And that's the same guidelines that you sent out. I just wanted Joy to put them on the screen so those of you who haven't seen them will have a chance to look at. And back as well.
Anya, sorry, just a little second. I have several screens open, so I'm gonna put that up in a second.
So while Joe is looking for that, I know several of you may have participated in the OYA planning for the basic and diversion plans guidelines. Ours don't look as pretty and sophisticated, I'm just telling you, and they probably won't. But at least we're trying to be as thorough as we can be in providing information to help people in the planning process. So hopefully that's the goal will be achieved.
So Anya, also while Joy's pulling those up, the subcommittee included both members of the Juvenile Justice Subcommittee, but also some county juvenile directors and the Oregon Youth Authority. And it really was a collaborative process to start to bring them not in line, but aligned with what the work is doing on the the basic dollars and diversion dollars, which are funds that are supported through the Oregon Youth Authority. And so, welcome, Tabiti. We're just talking about the guidelines. And so just really, when you're looking at these, know that Debbie Martin from OYA participated with us and to have the conversation.
Thank you, Molly, and thank you, Joy. Do you mind just putting, scrolling up to the beginning of the document? Thank you. So the format has not really changed since the last planning process, but we are trying to be a little more specific in whose information we're asking for, because there was confusion. And I don't know if it comes across as, but in that particular area, we need to know who will sign the agreement on behalf of the county, because we have multiple options given here. And then who the lead agency will be. Joy, do you mind scrolling down just slowly? And out of that lead agency, who will be the fiscal information? And now that we're having the money goes through the electronic grant management system, who will be submitting the claims? So hopefully it's not going to be too confusing or too many contacts to be looked for. And Joe, could you move to the next? And the next page just goes through the statutes and why we're doing what we're doing. So we try to stay within what is required, what is really required by the statute of us to do as an agency and as the council, and also what is required of a local community to do as a plan submittal or developer. So Joy, if you keep on going down. So with that, we've come up with required plan elements, which are not really that different from what we've asked to provide before, because again, we're just following the statute. So in the planning process is defined in statute. So you have to have community partners, you have to have a approval by LIPSIC or county governing body. If you don't have a LIPSIC, you have to have an information about the local community of juvenile justice issues, needs and barriers, and so forth. And you have to have a summary of key data supporting the recommended strategies. We've had quite a discussion about what kind of data we're looking for. And so this is what we have, and everybody has, and every single community has access to. Every county has own racial RRI report, which is looking at disparities within your own juvenile justice system. So those reports are available to each one. And also just recently, NPC Research completed individual evaluations of every single county data for the previous biennium. So it will be hopefully helpful for each of you to take a look at what's, evaluations show in the past, and maybe there are some lessons to be learned or not, but at least that will be available. Now, the population to be served, that's the area that we're proposing a change. And I'll ask Molly to help me describing the change, but I'm just letting you know that the target population remains unchanged. It's as defined in statute, same risk factors, irrelevant how many, other than it has to meet the statutory requirement of one or more, so 2 or more. But where we're proposing a change here is on the age group. The age group in the past was 10 to 17, but that was a decision made by JCPAC at that time, Juvenile Crime Prevention Advisory Committee. It's not a statutory age range. So we don't have to change statute. We don't even have to change agency rules. We just need to change it as a policy and include in guidelines. And Molly, do you want to talk a little bit about why we're extending the age range?
Sure. So the reason that there was a conversation around expanding the age is there's going to be legislation introduced in this upcoming legislative session to change the age of when a youth can be petitioned into court into the juvenile justice system. And so it's doing an age floor of 12. And so in doing that, the conversation with the partners that are focusing on changing that piece of legislation acknowledged that there may be a subsequent ask to be able to provide services for youth between the ages of 8 and 12 who have potentially come to the level of a juvenile department or juvenile justice system that previously might have been petitioned to come in within the jurisdiction of the court. It's very technical, and I understand that it's very kind of technical language right there, but it really was just to expand the age down to what data showed us was kind of the lowest age. There were maybe 1 or 2 statewide outliers over a period of years, but really the age where there were more than one or several youth that had been petitioned to come under the jurisdiction of the juvenile court. So it was really kind of acknowledging that the juvenile justice system might have a bit of a policy shift to focus more of prevention, restorative monies and efforts at this younger age population. And I would be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Madam. Tori is here.
Oh, good. Tori, did I do okay?
Perfect.
Excellent. Okay, there are no questions about the population to be served. Let's move on. So services programs to be funded, same as we asked before, just description of the services, and sometimes it's more than one, sometimes it's an area of services, but every service needs to be described because it needs to be approved as part of the plan. And then again, depending on the community, sometimes services are provided by lead agency, which is in most cases, that would be the juvenile department, or there is a subcontracted organization, community-based organization, or any other type of agency providing the service. And we need to see, who will be providing the services and how. Now, JCP risk assessment tool, that's a given. That's not going anywhere. And again, we need to have some information like who will be doing the training on the use of the assessment tool, we will be providing technical support as needed. If you would need training on the use of the assessment tool, or if you need access to data management, how to use it and so forth. Troy, do you mind scrolling up, please? Down. Now, budget, by popular demand, we will be using OYA budget worksheets, since they've created a really good and easy to follow one. So we will borrow it, and I think they said it's okay. So that shouldn't be an issue. Now, the next required element of the plan is the evidence-based practice checklist. You may recall that Youth Development Division funds are subject to evidence-based program requirement. And over the years, we've used the checklist that was created almost 20 years ago. Isn't that right, Molly? By a group of researchers working with the JCPAC, and that's the checklist that we've been relying on for years, and that's kind of how we help explain that the agency has been meeting the requirements of the evidence, but our assessments are based on the information you provide. And I just got notice that my internet connection is unstable, so I'm going to turn off my camera. Sometimes it helps, but hopefully you can still hear me. And I promise not to talk very much. So that's why it stays here. There is a conversation maybe happening to whether we should continue to be subject to evidence-based practice requirement under the statute. But if a change like that will happen, we probably don't have time for this legislative session. But if there's a strong will within communities, that's something to consider maybe for the next session. But as of right now, the requirement stays. Now, the next one is cultural appropriateness. And you may have noticed that we moved it in its category of its own. And I'm going to tell you the good news. So we were able to recruit a new racial and ethnic disparities coordinator. And he will start in January. So communities will have technical assistance as you develop plans as needed. I'm super excited about him starting in January. So at the next meeting, he will have an opportunity to come in front of you, introduce himself, and then maybe Molly can invite to the OJDA meetings and so forth. So we can build that partnership from day one. And then lastly is the relationship of JCP prevention services to the basic and diversion. It's in statute, so they need to be connected. Now, we spoke with Debbie Martin, so it looks like OYA will not be requiring JCP basic and diversion plans in until later, in May, I think she said. But we would be asking for the JCP prevention plan to come in by the end of March, so that both the Juvenile Justice Committee and the Council have the time to review the plans, come back with feedback if any, and go in contractual things. So by that, looks like by the end of March, my understanding is that the basic and diversions plans will not be ready. So, but at least you will probably have some ideas what you're going to be putting into those plans, what type of services will be there. So some kind of reference to the plan and the development should be made. And that's pretty much it. As far as the draft guideline goes.
Perfect. Thanks, Anya. I'm going to ask Sam or Tori, any of the other committee members that worked on this with us. Do you have anything to add?
Not for Sam, but yep, yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Sam.
Oh, since Sam didn't mention it, but I want to say that we talked about education data. So education data, if you have access to your own education data and you feel the relevance in the development of the plan, by all means. Or if you feel that you could use some technical assistance in accessing that information, we will try to help on an individual county by county basis. Sorry, Tori, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay. I was just gonna say, I think the goal in sitting down to kind of develop this was to make it easily followed, you know, as we're creating these plans, that we know exactly what's being asked so that we can provide that. And so I think trying to be as clear as possible on what Youth Development Division is looking for in their answers, you know, what they're expecting, trying to make that as clear so it makes it easier for us to kind of follow through the request and be able to give a description and what they need to come up with a good plan.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think the beautiful part of the committee was we had both people who review and people who write the plans, having conversations so that we could get both kind of sides to make it clearer. And I think that's what everyone really strived to do. So I appreciate the committee. With the screen share, which I still appreciate, I can't see everybody. Brian, welcome. I see that you joined us. Brian, you participated in at least one of the subcommittees. Do you have anything to kind of share?
I don't. I'm driving back from Corvallis, so
okay. Then I will
just
let you
gonna hear my like car sounds. No, I think you guys. I think you've covered it. I appreciate the work of the committee. I confess that I haven't I know Anya sent around the document, but I didn't get a chance to like closely look at it. But based on what I've heard, and hearing Tori's comments and your comments, Molly, like our desire to make this a more like a document or an outline guideline, set of guidelines that people can follow. I think was part of our not follow, and then we can get responses that we can more easily evaluate. I think we're heading in the right direction. So that's what I got.
Great, thank you. So Adrian, you are new to the committee, but Rafi or Tabiti, do you have either one of you have any thoughts or questions? Because you were able to participate in our last round.
I don't have any further questions.
Great, it's good to see you.
Yeah, thank you, same here. It's good to see you as well.
I was just going to say not at this point, but I appreciate the work of the committee because even being so new during the last round, it felt like there were some areas for improvement. So just appreciate it.
Great. Adrian, being the new eyes, did we just totally miss something that you think, oh, we need to talk about?
Not that I see.
Great.
It's been great. Yeah. No.
So my request from the committee is we do have a meeting on Thursday where we would like to finalize these. And so I'm going to ask Anya to kind of go over the timeline of the timeline.
Right, so the timeline, the plan, the guidelines will be released and sent to the communities early in January. And with the expectations that plans are due by the end of March. And in between, in the interim, we will be offering and responding to technical assistance requests as needed as they come in, and the committee will be at your service, and certainly YDD staff. And then also, so once the plan come in, we will have between March, end of March and June, early June, that's when the Youth Development Council will meet to approve the plans. So that the review and pre-approval process will be taking place in April and May. So 2 months should be a sufficient time for the committee to complete the review and come up with recommendations to the council, as well as provide feedback in a timely manner, so that some communication will be happening prior to the plan's approval. And then the contracts, you know, that's we will probably not know the exact allocation amounts until later during the summer, but regardless, the contracts will be either extended, or my hope is to extend the current grant agreements for time and for money, so we don't have to go through this whole new procurement process again, but I cannot promise. I'm still, I don't know, Brian is driving, but we're trying to get this procurement process started as early as possible to, but I don't think there'll be any issues with overall finalizing the agreements and things like that.
Okay, but in order to do that, we need to make a recommendation to the YDC this Thursday at our meeting. And so I would like to hear any feedback or any changes you would like to see in the document. Just first, if there's anything that we need to correct. And then after that, then we'll see if we can, if there's some consensus to move them forward. Okay. Without hearing any kind of thoughts or corrections or additions, I am going to ask for confirmation that I can move it forward with the recommendation of the Juvenile Justice Committee to the YDC for their comments, and then hopefully that we're able to successfully pass them on Thursday, so that we can kind of stay with this very optimistic timeline that definitely the counties are wanting to rise up to for that very piece, which is around the contracting. So unless I hear any objections, I'm going to move forward if there was consensus. Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it has been a good process. I've appreciated everybody taking the time to commit to kind of going through this line by line during the subcommittee meetings. That was really helpful. And now thinking about JCP and thinking about kind of the last stretch of our biennium, we have 2 counties that are requesting a revision to their JCP plan. And it's always kind of this interesting crystal ball, right? That we kind of think, oh, we know what's going to happen for the next 2 years. And things change. So Anya, I'm going to let you kind of guide us through Jackson and Klamath County's revision requests.
I will actually ask.
You want to start with Klamath or Jackson? Jackson.
Jackson, because Jackson was there first, just like chronologically.
Yes.
So, Joy, do you mind putting the Jackson County plan revision request on the screen? And since we have the requestor in the audience, so Joe, would you mind just giving a very brief overview why you're requesting the change and what the change will look like? And Dan will ask you to do the same when it comes to yours.
Sure. So the structure of our plan is not changing. So it's still focused on our after-school program. So our probation kids or kids that are on diversion agreements. what it's doing is requesting a change in our provider. So currently we have a probation officer that's assigned to that, and he runs it, but we are partnering with Pathfinders, which is a peer support program. And so we really think that that's a better use of the funds in terms of actually utilizing individuals that have either gone through the criminal justice system or substance abuse system that have lived experience. And so really try to get that connection with youth at a little different level. And then also expanding that where they'll do some substance abuse panels within our detention and residential programs. We've always struggled with the typical AA, NA groups coming in, and again, with those with lived experience that have either gone through, and some have gone through our system. One individual that's been hired, who's the supervisor over it, had gone through the juvenile system. And so really it's just looking at a different provider versus us doing it internally, of contracting with an external partner and providing pretty much the same services. And then what we're hoping to do is build upon this and move into mentoring and transitional care out of our residential program, where we're required to provide that 6-month transition as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Joy. Committee members? Okay, so I am feeling like maybe committee members don't know or don't feel as much like they may know. Yeah, that's why I'm thinking to BD. So Joe, can you just kind of talk just a tiny bit about what the funds were used for before and how this is a transition over?
Sure. So I'd say historically before our after school program, this was used for truancy reduction. So we had contracted with the Bedford School District to really look at truancy and how to improve that. You know, not that that was a bad program, but it really was difficult to really try to look at the services being provided, the dollar amount for the number of kids being involved. And so we transitioned into our after school program, which is really an alternative to detention. And so in lieu of placing kids in detention, they would be placed in our after school program that runs Monday through Friday, 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. during the school year. And then the summer, we also run that. It's more during the daytime, but it's still a 4-hour block of time. And so probation officers can place kids in there if they have technical violations, you know, like during school, not going to school, drug use, not following rules at home, things like that. And then during the summer, same thing, excluding school. It gives them an opportunity. We do evidence-based skill groups in those, depending on the age of youth. We do some vocational pieces as well. During the school year, they have opportunity to work on their homework during that time as well. We feed them dinner, and they have some, if they don't have homework, some quiet time reading. And so that pretty much takes up that 4-hour block. And so we're really trying to use it as a prevention piece of one, placing kids in detention for technical violations, and then also just as an accountability piece for youth, either on diversion agreements or on probation.
Yeah, that's helpful. This is Adrian. I know sometimes stories help to demonstrate impact. So do you have any success stories or something that you could also share that would allude to the work that's being done and how what the impact has been?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a part of our continuum. And so again, we're trying to develop more alternatives to detention instead of just our community service program. So which is fine of having kids work, but really to try to develop some of those skills. If is around decision-making or the peer group association. And so it's building upon what our probation staff are doing around our epics, where they're doing one-on-one skill development and some practicing. We've modeled our after-school programs very similar to where they do an initial check-in of kind of how things are going. They review what either their probation officers been having to work on goal-wise, or if this is a subsequent day of after-school program of what they had worked on the prior. And then they'll go through some skill development areas, and then they'll kind of do a checkout of kind of where they're at. And then they'll do those other things in terms of homework and things. And so it's hard to say this alone, standalone, is preventing kids from going deeper into the system, but it's part of our continuum. And so really those things prior to detention as a alternative. And so, you know, some kids, it doesn't take much for them to get back on track. Some youth repeat and go through the after school program several times. It's open-ended, so it's not a closed session. Kids can come and go as often as they need to. So, you know, I think it's helpful in terms of us not just placing kids in detention for technical violations. It's provided us a resource that we can also use in that aspect.
Thank you. That's great.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So what is the cost differential with this approach to what you've done before? And how will this expenditure impact? I know it's not just about cost, but and the other thing is what kind of data strategy do you have in mind to sort of gauge what you're suggesting here against what you've done in the past, to sort of get an idea of what's working and what's not? Or is that possible?
Sure. I don't have exact figures for you, but I can tell you it's about $200 a day to place a kid in detention. And it is not costing us $200 a day to place a kid in our after school program. So there's a huge differential in cost. And so I think that helps us, one, manage it. So we have 16 detention beds that we're currently staffing. That helps us manage those 16 beds for the highest risk kids that need around public safety in terms of a secure placement. And so it allows us to put a lot more youth through our after school program at a lower cost than that higher. And also the difference between secure and not in terms of decision making on those things. And I would say that now I'm forgetting what your second part of that question was, because it was cost and
data.
Yeah. What's your strategy for tracking what you'll deem to be a success?
Yeah, so we track it by the JCP risk assessment. And so all youth that go into that have had a JCP risk assessment. Most of those youth are on probation, so we continue to do the reassessment. So our measurement is reducing that risk. And so we do that periodically through time of probation, and then at closure of probation. We are only closing cases where youth have reduced their risk to reoffend. And so again, it's part of that continuum. They have a lot of different services they're getting, but that's the goal in terms of reducing their risk. And if youth are increasing, then we have, we'll have to look at other resources for them too, if that means out-of-home placement or things where they can get more in-depth services. But we have about an 85% reduced risk closure rate right now in probation in terms of the services kids get. So it's it's pretty high on that in terms of it being a part of the continuum. That answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. I have another one though.
Sure.
How many? You have 16 beds. So what is the occupancy rate per day on average of those beds? I mean, so if it's 16 would be about what, 3,200 a day. And so that's quite a huge expenditure for the year. But what do you actually average per day?
Over the last several years, it's been 13.
13 a day?
Yep.
At $200 per kid a day?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's a $2 million. I mean, detention's expensive.
Yeah, it's really one of those challenging pieces, DBD, that whether it's 12 kids or 3 kids, the cost of the running the facility is kind of a fixed cost because you have to have the doors open and the lights on. But it's still the value of doing the right thing and reduce per day cost for kids. Is that fair to say, Joe?
Yeah, yeah. Our staff ratio is 1 staff to 8 youth. That's a best practice. And so that's what our staffing is all the time. So again, if we drop down to 9 youth, we still have that same ratio of 2 staff on. We don't reduce it down, or if we reduce down to 8 kids, we don't drop 1 staff off and only work with 1 staff. So that most of our cost is in staffing. It's probably 80% or more in staffing. And that includes our contracted staff with like mental health, our medical, all those things as well. So.
Yeah, incarceration is very expensive. Other thoughts for Jackson County's request? Okay. So Anya, I have to do a process check. Does this need to go to YDC on Thursday, or can the Juvenile Justice Subcommittee approve the change?
This authority has been delegated to the Juvenile Justice Committee by the YDC, so you can make this determination today.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure. Any opposed to the change for Jackson County's request? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Joe. And I also really want to, Anya, at our next meeting, I would love to have MPC come talk about the report, because it was a pretty profound report this last year, and they've done a beautiful job of creating the report. And it just popped in my mind when Tabiti was talking about data, that we probably should review the data we request and how we measure ourselves.
Great idea.
To hold ourselves accountable to that. Okay, Klamath.
Thank you. I'm Dan Golden, Director of Klamath County Juvenile Department. Historically, our JCP funding, all the way back to the Commission on Children and Families, only funded a couple of different community organizations. And then with the dissolving of the commission, the Juvenile Department inherited as a conduit the funding and the determinations of the delinquency prevention plan. And what we're doing here today is we have 2 different community organizations, Citizens for Safe Schools and Lutheran Community Services. And this particular project change has to do with the Lutheran Community Services delivery of services in our community. Lutheran Community Services previously and actually historically had a project called Project Changes that was focused on one of our 2 school districts, the Klamath County School District, which is the larger of the 2 school districts present here in Klamath County. They did not intersect with the city school district to any great degree. And those were generalized counseling services being offered in the county school district to what were formerly described as at-risk youth population. with focus on our native youth who are somewhat overrepresented in the juvenile justice system here in Klamath County. They have, after the pandemic, dropped project changes due to some changes being conducted in the county school district, and developed the project that you have in front of you here called Klamath Project Youth Empowerment. And this will be a substance abuse education, prevention, diversion, and treatment program with a number of different aspects to it. But we'll have a slightly larger focus in the community in both school districts, basically targeting youth in the 12 to 18 population. And also directly with Klamath Tribal Health, outreach to the courts, and specific to the juvenile justice population, outreach to juvenile detention. And that's significant because one of our problems in our juvenile detention facility has been to attract ongoing behavioral health, counseling, and assessment services on a regular ongoing basis. Those of you that are familiar with detention and some of the funding issues and things there know that the Oregon Health Plan cannot sustain funding to assessment and behavioral health services within the juvenile detention facilities because of federal Medicaid rules. And we have been wrestling with this problem for so many years and trying to figure out workarounds and all kinds of things. Well, this particular Project Youth Empowerment, will send CADC and QMHA level folks to come in on a regular basis in juvenile detention and perform assessment services with the population there, and referrals into other community services, because I think, as we all know, most of the population coming through juvenile detention at the county level is relatively short term, in and out of the facility and within 4 or 5 days and back in the community. And so being able to intersect that population with assessment services, and then continuing counseling services for those who remain in juvenile detention for a length of time is a particularly critical service that we've tried to develop for a long time. And basically, as the county schools kind of retreated from project changes, I had a number of meetings with the Lutheran Community Services and stressed to them our needs as a juvenile justice agency. Now, that's a small population anymore. Certainly since the pandemic, that juvenile detention population has been small, but and quite small compared to, say, 20 and 30 years ago. But to have the assessment and behavioral health services able to reach into that facility and intersect with that population while they're there in custody, I think has been a critical need for a long time. And one of our problems, of course, that also many of you that run a facility know, is oftentimes the most difficult cases to gain placement out of that facility back into the community are those with specific, very serious behavioral health challenges. Those kids tend to sometimes just get stuck and without placement possibilities. And so having ongoing counseling services that can help with that population is critical. So at any rate, this does not produce any kind of a budget change. This does not change the agency that's the parent agency of providing the services, but it's a different developed service model that will be present in the community here in Klamath County, and particularly within the juvenile justice facility itself. So, and as you go through the whole proposal, it basically checks all the boxes with the various requirements of the funding, evidence-based programming, the various principles around delivery of services, the needs and responsivity, the folks that are delivering the services, QMHA level, with CADC certified folks coming in. All of those are checked off. So I'm just here to seek approval to basically switch programs delivered by the Lutheran Community Services agency here in Klamath County, which has been a continuing partner in the JCP process. And then in our next delinquency prevention plan, we'll obviously change the description of programming there.
Okay, thank you. So hang on one second. I need to see something. So for everyone on the line, in your initial handouts from Joy, there was a copy of the Klamath proposal if you want to go through it. Any questions for Dan? Okay. Thank you for, and you had the benefit of hearing Joe's questions for me, Dan. So you answered my question as you were going through because you had heard Joe. So that I appreciate that. I'm going to ask the same question before. I think we have it within our purview. It still meets the same qualifications that came through the original. Is there anyone opposed to Klamath updating their JCP plan? And I guess the only thing else, Dan, is these youth still get their JCP risk screens just like normal. That doesn't change.
Right.
Okay. Perfect. Anything else? Okay. Okay. I'm gonna take silence as acceptance and share with Anya that we can do the approval of this. I really appreciate both Joe and Dan taking the time to communicate with us in a thoughtful manner so that we could take a look at something and that it stays within the perspective of the JCP. So thank you for that both, and thank you for participating in our committee today and listening to the Council of State Governments. I don't know if either one of you were able to participate in the focus groups, but I just really appreciate you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Molly.
Yeah. Anya, I'm going to ask, I don't see Lindsay here. Are you going to take the OJDP compliance monitoring update for her?
I will. Lindsay unfortunately is not feeling well, so she could not be here today.
Best wishes from us.
So I will give you an emotional update on the status of compliance, because we just received a letter from the OJJDP that we're in full compliance with all 4 core protections of the plan. And I'm saying it's an emotional one because you may recall that Lindsay and I have shared over the last year what a journey it was to get into the compliance. And Lindsay, being new in that role, not only had to collect, compile, and analyze the data coming from law enforcement agencies, Oregon Youth Authority, jails, court holding facilities, just the whole of the compliance universe, and submit it, and at the same time go through a full revision of the compliance monitoring manual in the process, being brand new. So just huge gratitude to Lindsay and job well done. So that said, now that we're in full compliance, we are expecting that our fiscal year 22 award will be coming our way as well. So now we're in compliance, but we have not received the funds. But we did receive the fiscal year 21 funding, which was contingent on the approval of the revised compliance monitoring manual. So this is what I wanted to bring to this group's attention, is that fiscal year 21 funding is the first year of the 3-year plan, which is our current plan. So that said, we have not determined how to allocate those funds other than in the application for the funding to the OJJDP. We selected 2 program areas and approximately about 200,000 each. One is alternative to detention, and the other program area was delinquency prevention. So what I would suggest to the group is not to rush with making decisions how to allocate those funds, but maybe take a good look at what those monies can support in the state, and what additional policy areas can they support. And on a very pragmatic and on a very selfish level, I would really appreciate if we could change the way we make federal awards to local communities to a federal fiscal year, to simplify the super complex and challenging reporting system that we have to adhere to. So that said, just the good news, we have the funds. We expect to get a full 22 allocation as well. But the idea is we need to come up with a plan of how to make those community investments. And in order to align with the federal fiscal year, our award should start October 1 and end September 30th, because that's, and if we are to go through that route, that gives us enough time to decide what criteria to put in RFA for, for the grant proposals, what specific areas should the proposals address. So say, if it's alternatives for detention, what type of alternatives are we anticipating to fund? And I'm just making it up because this is just a suggestion. So Ralphie mentioned today that we have a very kind of sporadic system of restorative justice services within the state. Is that something that we want to support as a council? Should we make some investments in restorative justice programming? So that's one option. And or we're also looking into making some changes to our probation system reform. So what is it? How can we be more targeted and more specific within the program areas that have been selected?
So I totally appreciate and really want to also support and advocate that we go to the federal fiscal for 2 reasons. One on each side of the coin. One is management from the state level and that process, and the other is on the side receiving grants. It becomes very clunky if you receive a grant outside of the federal fiscal. It makes it very difficult. So I would recommend that we support that. And I think that there's a lot happening in the next 11 months. And we just heard about the Council of State Governments. And I know that there's a lot of work around some evidence-based reform for Oregon, as well as we have the legislative process. So I think I would really concur. I think that's a great idea. I hadn't thought about it before, Anya, until just now, but I've been on both sides of that and would just agree that that makes sense, and it gives us some time to really think through what we want to look at. So that's a good idea.
Oh, great, thank you. So maybe if not a January meeting, but maybe during meeting on February, we could take a closer look and have a conversation about those potential types of programs that we could ask proposals for within the program areas that have been selected and identified.
Actually, maybe if we took that meeting before even we get that far, take that meeting to really understand, thanks, Joe, really understand the federal funding part of it, and just the core strategies from the OJDP, simply because we have a newer committee, and just that would be great.
That would be great. So should we do it in January or February? Oh, first question, should we have a meeting in January? Because it's coming up quite soon.
So I'm gonna actually recommend with the holiday, I don't know that we're gonna have enough meaningful to talk about in January. And I really want this meeting to be, when we call it, that everybody make it a priority on their calendar. So unless there's a driving piece that I don't know about, I would recommend that our next meeting be in February, but that's a different, we can talk about that a little bit later if we need to. But I would just ask that we have a bit of a deep dive, not even thinking about our grants in some ways, but just having a deep dive into the federal kind of core work, Anya. And then March or April, we can start talking about what that looks like for us. That's just my thoughts. Tabiti or Adrian, Rafi, or even Brian. I know you're on the road, but please feel free to weigh in, any of you guys, to make sure I may be seeing it wrong.
See that Rafi and Adrian are exchanging some comments.
Perfect. That is, then I'm gonna.
I think it sounds good to me. It's in reference to what we're discussing, right? Not to Joe Ferguson leaving.
No, well, yeah, no, it's so in reference to what, because I don't know that we've always felt so rushed to take the time to really understand what this committee has been charged to do from the federal level.
Sounds excellent to me.
Okay. All right, and wish Lindsay our best for us.
Will do, thank you.
And we'll roll now into the Title II formula grant.
That's basically we covered that conversation as well. So
yeah,
they're so connected, you know.
They are.
Full compliance means that we're
okay. Anything else for the good of the group today? I'm going to make sure that we give some time back to your busy days. So unless there is anything else that's just really that we haven't covered or feel like we need to have a conversation about.
Molly, could we just confirm that the next meeting will be on February? What's the first Monday in February?
Let me look. Let me look at my calendar, trusty calendar here. It will be February 6th is what I have on my calendar as a Juvenile Justice Subcommittee. February 6th at 1 o'clock.
That sounds great.
So for many, I won't see you until then. So happy holiday season, happy new year, safety, care, and best health during this crazy season of influenza and COVID-19 and RSV and all of those crazy things that get us down. And if you have children, blessings for them as well. I think I have more staff out with little ones not feeling well than I've had for a couple years. So with that, I think we're adjourned, Anya. Well, anybody else can say anything too. I should not have said that. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.